Who buried this lawyer alive? The Corryn Rayney case? Well, Desi Studios. We're gonna look at that. This is a long one. Sit down, kiddos. Here we go.
On a calm September night in Perth, Australia, a city known for its stillness.
Australia. Of course, Australia. Why would it not be Australia?
Something unthinkable shattered the quiet. By dawn, a woman who had spent her life.
I have an answer. I can already answer the question who did this. I can already answer who did this. It was a kangaroo.
Fighting for justice was gone, and one unsuspecting man became the subject of everyone's suspicion. Whispers spread from courthouse corridors to family dinner tables, each retelling darker than the last. This wasn't just a murder, it was a storm that would tear through one of Australia's most respected families and leave the truth buried beneath layers of lies, law, and betrayal. This is the story of that one woman and the questions she left behind. This is the story of Corryn Rayney.
I just like to avoid the music.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Desi Crime Podcast, a show where we dive deep into some of the craziest cases from around South Asia. I'm your host Ishwarya.
And I'm Aryan.
And the case that I have for you today is one that shook an influential suburb in Australia in 2007.
Shwara,
This might be a bit harsh, but this hairstyle isn't suiting homie Perth, the shithole of Australia. Yeah, but this hairstyle isn't suiting this man. He looks better with like the longer, I don't know, would you call it curlier? We need that fixing, buddy. I mean, it's 7 years ago, so that's very much, it's 7 years ago, so hey, he had a glow up.
So many crazy Australian Indian cases we have covered on the podcast. I think more than any other diaspora, Australia sort of comes to the forefront whenever we cover cases outside the subcontinent.
And not probably number of cases that we've covered of diaspora from there, but I think in magnitude of craziness,
yeah, sure.
What's gone down in the land down under is really...
Down under, I think frequency also, because the proportion... Cases to the proportion of the Australian population.
Is,
it's a sparsely populated giant island where crazy stuff seems to be happening. But here in India, in the subcontinent, we just celebrated Diwali and wanted to wish all of you happy Diwali. This is being recorded a few days after. Yeah. And I just want to show you the lack of logistical sort of confluence between me and Aishwarya. When she picked me up to on our way to the studio today, this is how she picked me up. There was no, Aryan, let's record in a kurta pajama, let's record in ethnic. I'm wearing the blandest possible outfit while you are dressed like a princess. This is just...
Well, why not look good for a video? I see no issue. It's a drug capital. That's crazy. More than Queensland. Interesting. I didn't know that stuff was going on in Australia like that.
It's bad. The only way I make peace with this is the fact that,
is the fact that his hair is now silver, white.
Yeah, anybody who is listening only on audio, you're probably saved from my appearance. Switch on the video to see what I've done to my hair.
Yeah, crazy.
But apart from that, Diwali.
Brother, that was not worth it. Nuh-uh. Whatever you did 7 years ago, nah, bro. Never do this again.
Might be over. The Diwali month is still on, and our Amazon Music early access is still available. So you'll get early access to Desi Crime episodes only for the month of October. Only on Amazon Music, free with your Prime membership. So go check out that now. Buy our book, Desi Crime book, available also on Amazon or your nearest bookstore. But enough about us. Aishwarya,
more about the story.
Take us to Australia.
A thin trail of oil glistened on a quiet suburban street in Subiaco, a suburb of Perth. It was August 15, 2007, 8 days since 44-year-old Corryn Rayney had vanished without a trace. That evening, police officers had finally located her missing silver Ford Fairmont on Kershaw Street, abandoned and silent. As investigators peered under the vehicle, they noticed a line of oil leading away from the car, like breadcrumbs pointing into the darkness. Dressed in blue forensic suits and armed with flashlights, they followed the leaking oil down the road and towards the sprawling expanse of Kings Park, a vast urban bushland that borders the city. Each step into the park's eucalyptus-scented trail tightened the knot in their stomachs. Soon,
the koalas. They were the koala mafia. the kangaroo mafia. It was the fucking emus. They did this. They did this as a revenge. As revenge for I guess, wrong target. Collateral damage against the Australians.
The trail veered off the pavement and into the trees along Lovekin Drive, one of the park's secluded lanes. There, amid the dense brush and red soil, officers discovered a patch of earth that looked freshly disturbed. What they found beneath would send shockwaves through the entire state of Western Australia. Under the glow of torchlight, detectives carefully brushed away the topsoil and leaves to reveal what lay beneath. In a shallow bush grave, buried head first in the dirt, were the remains of a human body. Even seasoned investigators felt their hearts skip. The body's clothing was disheveled, a blouse torn, jeans.
Oh, interesting. So, interesting position. He didn't dig that deep, did he?
Unzipped, details hinting at a brutal death.
When you say head first, do you mean like the body was vertically buried?
Vertically down, yeah. Head first into the ground. Yeah, a really eerie detail.
Because usually, I mean, I don't need to say this.
That's kind of terrifying, because, right, you can, like, when she was, right, the title is that she was buried alive, right? That's terrifying, because, like, you're gonna be stuck head first in the dirt. And, like, whoever is burying you is gonna throw that on top of you. So you'll eventually you'll desperately fight for air. And I'm assuming she was also tied up completely, right? Or she was unconscious. Two options here. Tied up or unconscious.
But when bodies are uncovered, whether cremated or whether buried after a murder, they're usually lying flat.
Right. And I'm guessing it's really, really inconvenient also to dig deeper this way.
No, exactly.
So I don't know if someone has tried to do exactly this kind of top-down digging, or if someone is just not a perfect digger and has created a grave that's lopsided in a way where the body has ended up head first.
Yeah, but I would imagine it to be digging something that is vertically deep.
Yeah.
If it's still narrow,
yeah,
is very difficult to dig.
Right.
And if it is as wide as it needs to be, but still that deep, then you have just done a lot of extra digging.
Right.
Which doesn't make sense if you're trying to save time.
Absolutely. And such an eerie detail keeps getting mentioned in this.
I mean, are we really arguing that somebody that buries somebody alive is in the mental headspace to make the decision on how to dig well? Are we really arguing about this? I don't see no point. I see no point. I see no point. Consider this. The person just needed a hole. That was it.
Case, the fact that her body was found head first.
That's very weird.
Yeah. The grave was isolated, a desperate attempt to hide a horror in one of Perth's most picturesque parks. And then, within moments, the once quiet park was immediately cordoned off and guarded through the night, whereby the next morning, forensic teams began painstaking work of excavating the site and gathering clues. They had little doubt whose body they had found. Nearby, one detective picked up a small object lying in the foliage, a paper place card like the one at dinner parties where they, cordon off your seat, with the name Lloyd Rayney on it. It was an eerie discovery that would later loom large in court, but on this day, the officer's focus was just on the grave. As news vans and police cars converged on King.
Is this another crazy husband story? This is another crazy husband story, isn't it?
Park, Perth's iconic skyline stood in contrast to the terrifying scene unfolding under the trees. By afternoon on August 16,
at least there's no beheading.
2007, Detective Senior Sergeant Jack Lee stepped before the gathering media, his face visibly disturbed. Quote, "I can confirm that the human remains found in Kings Park this afternoon are those of Corryn Rayney," he announced. The name sent a jolt through the community. Corryn Rayney was not just any missing person. She was a respected Supreme Court registrar, a familiar face in legal circles, and a mother of 2 young girls. The detective's voice was a mix of sorrow yet commitment. Quote, "This now becomes a homicide investigation. The person involved in this murder was at the scene for some time," end quote. In other words, whoever had done this had taken their time to dig a grave and bury her with thoughtful precision, an act as chilling as the murder itself. Reporters scribbled notes and cameras flashed as Sergeant Lee urged the killer to come forward. Quote, "It may well be that this has occurred and it wasn't intended. If that's the case, that person should come forward to the police," he said, a suggestion that perhaps this crime might have begun as something else, a confrontation or an accident on the road before spiraling into tragedy. Behind him, a line of forensic officers continued to scour the bush floor for any hint of evidence, footprints, fibers, disturbed plants, anything that might identify who had done this. The Chief Justice of Western Australia, Wayne Martin, issued a public statement that day on behalf of the court where Corryn worked, calling her a highly respected member of the court and a good friend, and expressing that all her colleagues were devastated by the news. In the span of a week, Corryn had gone from a vibrant professional and loving mother to the victim of one of Perth's most shocking crimes. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows through Kings Park, detectives carefully removed Corryn's body, still clad in the dusty remnants of the outfit she had worn on her last night alive, and sent her to the coroner's office for examination. Yellow police tape fluttered in the evening breeze around the makeshift gravesite, now a place of grief and curiosity for onlookers from the road. The city's news outlets broke into programming with somber updates. Perth, mother of two, found murdered. Friends and family who had been holding out hope for Corryn's safe return were now crushed by confirmation of her death.
Surprise, surprise. I wonder where this is going. So, for now, we really just have family members and friends as the potential perpetrators. We'll see how this goes.
Outside the Rayney family home in the riverside suburb of Como, detectives quietly delivered the worst news imaginable to her loved ones. In the days that followed, Perth would come to learn more about the woman whose life had been so cruelly taken and the perplexing circumstances of her death. Corryn Rayney's story, from her extraordinary childhood journey to Australia to the fracturing of her seemingly perfect life, was about to unfold in the public eye. But on the day her body was found, one agonizing question loomed above all. Who killed Corryn Rayney? Police vowed to leave no stone unturned in pursuing the answer because a murderer was now roaming the streets free. What no one knew then was that this case would evolve into one of Western Australia's most infamous legal sagas that would grip the nation for years. And at the centre of it all stood Corryn's own husband, a prominent barrister named Lloyd Rayney, who was about to find himself cast in a spotlight no one could have predicted. But long before she became the name on everyone's lips in Perth, Corryn Veronica Ann De Silva had already survived a harrowing chapter of history. She was born in 1963 to an Indian family living in East Africa. Her early childhood unfolded in the lush...
Oh, okay. Interesting. East Africa, Uganda. Okay. Okay, born in Uganda.
Green hills of Uganda, a country that by the late 1960s was under the grip of the brutal dictator Idi Amin. In August 1972, when Corryn was just 9 years old, Idi Amin infamously...
I don't want to make it, but I have to. Do you know the way? Murder is roaming free and De Silva. I got no idea where that name came from. Interesting, regardless.
ordered the expulsion of Uganda's entire Asian minority, giving them 90 days to leave the country. Families of Indian origin, like Corryn's, were suddenly rendered stateless, targeted solely because of their ethnicity. Corryn's parents packed whatever they could, shielded their children as best as possible, and fled the only home they had known.
A statement has been made that those who stay here after the deadline will be sitting on fire. So we do not know what that sitting on fire really means.
By 1973, the De Silva family arrived in Australia.
See, with dictators, that is very simple. Either jail or death. One of the two.
As refugees from Idi Amin's Uganda, hoping for safety and a fresh start. For young Corryn, the move to Australia was the beginning of a new life in every sense. The family settled in Perth, far from the turmoil they'd escaped. Imagine the cultural shock of a 10-year-old girl who had witnessed the fear and chaos of exile, stepping onto Australian soil, hearing English and unfamiliar accents, and seeing a world utterly different from the one she left behind. But by all accounts, Corryn thrived in her new homeland. Classmates and teachers soon recognized her sharp mind and determination. She excelled at Rossmoyne Senior High School in Perth's southern suburbs, proving herself as a top student despite the challenges of resettlement. Outside the classroom, Corryn was deeply spiritual. She became active in a Christian youth group during her teen years. Those who knew her described her as compassionate and grounded.
Based, very based.
Someone who, even as a young immigrant girl, carried a quiet strength forged by the adversities her family had overcome. By the early 1980s, Corryn set her sights on a career in law, perhaps inspired by a drive to help others or to seek justice in the way her own family had been denied in Uganda. She earned admission to the prestigious University of Western Australia, where she studied law and continued to grow her network of friends and mentors. It was during these university days and early legal apprenticeships that fate brought Lloyd Rayney into her life. Corryn was working as an article clerk at the Australian government solicitor's office when she met him, a young lawyer who was then a junior prosecutor. The two clicked immediately, both ambitious, intelligent, and driven by their careers in the law. While Corryn's heritage was Indian African and she'd come to Australia as a refugee, Lloyd's background was equally unique. Born in 1962 in Aden, now Yemen, to an Indian family, he too had come to Australia as a child. They were a Desi power couple in...
Interesting. So, Indians in Uganda? And then also Indians in Yemen. Interesting. Very interesting.
making, 2 children of the Indian diaspora finding love and success in a new land. Corryn and Lloyd married in the early 1990s, embarking on what looked from the outside like a storybook partnership. Over the years, they built what one newspaper later called, quote, a seemingly perfect life. Respected senior legal roles, a generous joint income, a beautiful home.
Isn't it always like this? From the outside, it seems like a perfect life, but then one of the two is an absolute monster. Or both are monsters.
In the upscale riverside suburb of Como, and eventually 2 lovely daughters, Caitlin and Sarah, born in 1994 and 1997. Corryn rose through the ranks of the legal world, earning a reputation not only for her keen intellect, but for her warm personality. By her early 40s, she had achieved a prominent position as a registrar of the Supreme Court of Western Australia. In fact, she presided over significant cases. Her name even made the papers for handling a high-profile bankruptcy case involving a fraudulent real estate agent. Colleagues described Corryn as deeply spiritual, compassionate, and admired in Perth's legal fraternity. She led a church group now too, befriended the local grocer, and still found time for simple joys like her weekly boot-scooting dance class in the suburb of Bentley. To everyone around her, Rayney was the last person you'd imagine meeting a violent end, and unlike
There seems to be a, what's the word, recurring theme. Like, the person is completely innocent and hasn't done anything evil, and then gone. We are everywhere. Look around you, even around you, even found some in your area. I don't appreciate you stalking me. I'd appreciate if you'd stop stalking me.
victim, as the newspapers would later say, whose loss seemed utterly senseless.
What's boot dance?
Boot scooting, it's this like interesting sort of like hipster country, like Australian version of a dance.
Is that your attempt at boot scooting?
Yeah, this is like did? On a seat for sure.
Guys, those of you who listen on audio, sometimes you should have seen what Ashwarya just did. I'm sure boot scooting is a real form of dance. Whatever
Absolutely.
she did was not that.
And I'm not claiming it was either.
No boots involved in her scooting.
No scooting involved in my booting. Lloyd Rayney too was a star rising. He made his mark as a Crown prosecutor, putting criminals behind bars on behalf of the state, and later transitioned into a successful barrister in private practice. In Perth's tight-knit legal community, the Rayneys were seen as a formidable pair, highly respected, well-connected, and on the surface, happy. On the surface is the key, because behind closed doors, cracks were forming in their marriage. The same year Corryn was promoted to the Supreme Court, Lloyd took a prestigious opportunity abroad, spending 18 months working in the Caribbean on a legal stint, while Corryn remained in Perth with the children. The long distance took its toll. Friends would later whisper that the separation exposed deeper issues between them, issues that only grew when Lloyd returned home. By mid-2007, those who knew the Rayneys sensed that something was wrong. The couple, though still living under the same roof, had become estranged, essentially leading separate lives while co-parenting their daughters. What went wrong in a marriage that seemed to have everything? In the courtroom, that
A classic.
question would later be dissected in painful detail, and we'll get into it soon. But as of now, to the world, the marriage seemed ordinary. Not particularly happy, maybe, but that's not uncommon. The Rayneys continued attending public events together, maintaining appearances. Those who saw them socially might have noticed a certain coolness between the spouses, but nothing to suggest the tragedy that was brewing. In fact, no one could have predicted what August 2007 would bring. Not Corryn's colleagues who admired her, not her fellow boot-scooting friends who laughed with her at the weekly dance class, and certainly not her 2 young daughters who adored both their mom and their dad equally. And in the first week of August 2007, those tensions that had been quietly mounting for months were about to explode into the public eye. The stage was set for a collision between private discord and public tragedy, a collision that would forever alter the lives of everyone connected to Corryn. Tuesday, August 7, 2007 began like any other day for Corryn. That morning, she kissed her daughters goodbye, headed to work at the Supreme Court, where she was known for her reliability and warm presence. By evening, the 44-year-old mother changed out of her office attire and put on something comfortable. It was boot scooting night. Every Tuesday at 7:30 p.m., Corryn joined a casual line dancing class at the Bentley Community Centre, a fun outlet where she and friends kicked up their heels to country.
Alright, and then on her way home, it happened. It must have happened. I wonder.
Music and forgot about life's worries for an hour or two. That night, witnesses later recalled Corryn laughing, dancing, and looking as if any troubles in her mind were the last thing she was thinking of. When class ended around 9:30 p.m., Corryn waved goodbye to her friends and stepped out into the cool winter night. She walked across the parking lot towards her car, the silver Ford Fairmont, likely already thinking about the next day's tasks or the daughters she'd soon check up at home on. It was the last time anyone saw her alive. What happens next remains a haunting mystery. Corryn never made it home that night. At the Rayney house in Como, the lights were on and the youngest daughter, 10-year-old Sarah, was getting ready for bed under her father's supervision. The older daughter, 13-year-old Caitlin, was out at a friend's house that evening. By 9:45 p.m. or so, Lloyd Rayney later said he noticed his wife hadn't returned, which was unusual for her routine. Perhaps he assumed though she was delayed or just ran an errand. However, as the minutes ticked by, concern grew.
For now, it appears that the husband is innocent. But you never know. First of all, he could have hired somebody. Second of all, the testimony's wrong. We'll see. We'll see how this goes.
Caitlin arrived home between 10:40 and 11 p.m. and by then, Corryn's absence was alarming. According to Lloyd's account to police, he tried calling Corryn's mobile phone but got no answer. With one daughter asleep and the other now anxiously waiting, there was little he could do that late at night. Lloyd would later claim he thought maybe Corryn had decided to stay overnight with a friend after class due to some personal issue, though that would have been extremely out of character for her, he said. By the next morning, Wednesday, August 8th, Corryn still hadn't shown up. She missed work, which immediately raised red flags. Corryn was known to be dependable and prompt. Other family and friends raised the alarm now too when they couldn't reach her. That morning, Rayney contacted the police to report his wife missing. Within hours, news bulletins flashed an alert about the disappearance of a, quote, Perth woman and a mother of two, noting that Corryn was last seen the previous night leaving a dance class. Police were, quote, concerned for the welfare of the missing Supreme Court registrar and appealed to the public for any information. At first, there was hope in everyone's mind. Perhaps Corryn had had an accident and was lying injured somewhere, or maybe her car had broken down and she'd gone looking for help. The possibilities were worrying, but a dark crime was not yet what people were assuming in those initial 48 hours. The Rayney family's silver Ford Fairmont was also missing, so police and loved ones searched Perth's roads and parking lots for any sign of the vehicle. Friends circulated her description and photo. Corryn was of Indian descent, 5'6" tall, with a friendly smile, a familiar face around the suburb. Her colleagues at the Supreme Court held out hope that any moment the phone would ring with good news. Meanwhile, detectives quietly started their inquiries. Standard procedure in missing persons cases is to look closely at those closest to the missing individual, if only to rule out any possible.
Well, that only leaves the husband. For now, that does only leave the husband. The daughters are too young to do anything. The husband is innocent. Tell that to a feminist. We'll see. We'll see how this goes.
That meant Rayney was questioned early. He recounted how he last saw Corryn when she left for her dance class and described his movements that night. Police noted that Lloyd himself was a seasoned prosecutor and appeared cooperative. He even went on television on August 13th to make a public appeal for helping find his wife. In that interview, Lloyd looked like any worried husband whose wife had been missing, pleading for anyone who knew something to come forward. If he was hiding any knowledge of what happened, he did not let it show. But despite his desperate pleas and quick action by the police, days passed with no sign of Corryn or her car. And then quickly, seemingly out of thin air, finally a breakthrough. On Tuesday, August 14, 2007, a week after Corryn vanished, a vigilant member of the public spotted an unattended silver sedan parked on a verge in Subiaco, an inner west suburb of Perth.
Oh, hi, look, I'm just wanting to report that missing car that's for the...
Okay, car found.
The mother that's missing. I'm 1 CDS 564.
Was that on the news, was it?
Yes, it was. It's that the Rayney woman. She's missing for over a week.
The license plate matched Corryn's Ford Fairmont. Police were notified and swarmed the area by nightfall. The car was oddly positioned as if hastily abandoned, but officers noted no obvious sign of struggle inside. No blood, no broken glass. But when they looked underneath, they found a gaping hole in the transmission oil pan, likely caused by a hard impact. Investigators soon deduced what had happened. The car had likely been driven over a low wooden edge or stump while off-road, ripping the oil pan open. Corryn, or whoever had driven the car up.
So somebody in the car, somebody did maybe push her over something and then destroyed the car or something. She hunted with the car.
After Corryn disappeared, had damaged it badly enough that it began hemorrhaging oil. Standing on that quiet Subiaco street, detectives realized that the oil leak was fresh and continuous, forming the drizzle line leading away from the Ford Fairmont. This was the clue that led them, literally, down the path to uncover Corryn's body. And then any initial hope the community felt gave way to horror as they discovered Corryn's body bruised, roughly a meter deep in the soil. Forensic experts carefully examined Corryn's remains at the site. Even to their trained eyes, there were no obvious fatal injuries. There were no bullet wounds or stab marks. In fact, the cause of death was not immediately clear at all. This perplexity would persist all the way to trial. However, subtle signs of trauma emerged, bruising around her head and neck, and a later autopsy which revealed internal injuries in the neck area, like hemorrhaging near the vertebrae, which indicated she had sustained, quote, injuries to her head, neck, and brain before death. One neuropathologist at trial described these as possibly caused by some form of neck restraint or blows, which are basically called rabbit punches, though not severe enough to be.
Oh, interesting. Interesting, okay.
Fatal alone. The most chilling detail came from her lungs, though. Traces of aspirated soil and plant pollen from Kings Park, where she was found, implying that Corryn likely took her last breath at the burial site, buried inside the ditch with her head towards the ground. In other words, she may have still been alive.
So she suffocated in what we would call the dirt. She suffocated in that hole. She suffocated in that hole and essentially died.
Unconscious but breathing when her killer dumped her into that grave. That thought sent shudders through everyone involved. Corryn Rayney may have been buried alive. On September 1st, 2007, Corryn's funeral was held, a day of grief and tributes that overflowed the church with mourners from all facets of her life. Her two young daughters, dressed in black, clutched their father's hands as the community mourned a life cut tragically short. The shock of her murder rippled, especially through Perth's Indian and Ugandan Asian community, people whose families had found refuge in Australia like hers did, only to see one of their own meet an unfathomable end. Underneath the condolences and the sorrow, murmurs of confusion and speculation had already begun. Who could have done this? Was it a random attack, a robbery gone wrong? As weeks passed with no arrests, some in the community and quietly within Corryn's own family started to fear a darker possibility. Was the killer someone she knew? Perhaps even
who knows?
Someone within her home.
Ishwara, I'm curious. In the initial sort of day that she disappeared, you described that her husband was there at home looking after the daughters.
That's right.
Putting them to bed or whatever may be. So from that initial image, it appears that he was home and hadn't left. And I think this is also corroborated by the daughters themselves.
Correct.
Then you also talk about this accident, sort of the hole in the car that was probably some sort of an accident that led to it. What it appears to me right now is that there was a collision between two cars, and in that collision, or whatever it may have been, her driving off-road, the person who clashed into the car got scared about his actions and then proceeded to do what they did. How do people connect the dots to somebody in the home? What is that piece of evidence that makes them believe it might have been somebody inside?
I think so. There's two parts to answer what you're saying. Firstly, the way the car was hemorrhaging oil, it's not that there was an accident. There's no collision marks on the car on the outside.
Yeah, so
it's just hemorrhaging from the bottom, which is...
Okay, so no collision marks, sure. But if she was like driving hastily and she drove over something that could have damaged it, I mean, that is still very much a possibility.
Indicating that someone has driven the car very rashly.
Okay.
Not that another car has come in collision with the car. So which is what the inspector said, that it's probably driven over like a side rail, it's driven over like a wooden paneling or something of that sort. That's damaged the car in the process. I think drawing the conclusion back to her husband and putting suspicion there is firstly very common.
Yeah,
like going back to the husband, a marriage that...
Probabilistically, totally get it.
Totally get it. You're right in pointing out that there are timeline issues. He does say he's with his daughters. Obviously, that's a strong alibi.
Yeah.
Neither of the girls are so young that they don't remember whether or not they saw their father that night. But there is that brief period that night where he's put one daughter to sleep and the other hasn't returned home. And that timeline actually will come into question soon now.
Okay.
But that is what people who suspect him say was his window for the crime. Okay. By late September 2007, those murmurs that we just discussed would explode onto front page news. Police were zeroing in on a suspect.
Okay, so we do have a time frame where the husband... So we do have a time frame where the husband potentially could have done it, meaning the killer is someone she knew, probably.
It wasn't a stranger. On September 20th, 2007, roughly 6 weeks after Corryn's body was found, Western Australia Police called an extraordinary press conference. Under the bright glare of TV cameras, Detective Senior Sergeant Jack Lee, the same officer who had announced the discovery of Corryn's body, made a statement that would come to define the entire case. Before a packed room of reporters, Sergeant Lee revealed that the police were now treating Lloyd Rayney as the prime and only suspect in the murder of his wife. The words landed like a thunderclap. It was almost unheard of for police to publicly label someone, especially a well-known lawyer, as the only suspect in a murder case before any charges are laid. The impact was immediate. Lloyd Rayney's name was splashed across headlines as the man accused in all but name of killing Corryn. The investigation was about to take a controversial turn, and the Rayney family's nightmare was far from over. The media, which had sympathetically covered Corryn's disappearance and funeral, now shifted tone to scrutinize Lloyd's every move. Outside the Rayney home, news crews camped out, hoping to catch a glimpse of the man now effectively public enemy number one in the eyes of many West Australians. Inside, Lloyd Rayney was reportedly furious and stunned. By naming him the sole suspect, the police had upended the presumption of innocence he was entitled to, a move that would later be harshly criticized in court. But at the time, the court of public opinion was already...
Later harshly criticized? Does that already mean that he did not do it? Interesting. Yeah, that is kind of a bad move.
Ready deliberating Lloyd's guilt.
Is there any precedent for why the police might have done this? Was this an investigative technique, or was this just a
It got
glaring
heavily
mistake?
ripped apart. It was a glaring mistake.
I mean, I've never, ever, even in India, when those press conferences are held, where the wrong person is, take the Ryan school killings, where the wrong person is made persona non grata by the police have at least, even on wrong causes, apprehended the person.
Correct.
And
And
then
charged them with something
and then
officially.
saying they've done it. Not just this is the guy.
Yep.
And the guy's a lawyer.
Yeah, this is bad. And this will not go down well for the police.
Also, something different about the Australian legal system is that the burden of proof, once the prosecution proves that or has a charge levied in minor cases of financial scam and whatnot, the burden of proof shifts to the defense to prove
interesting.
that they are the ones that haven't done
But
it.
that's just minor crimes.
Minor crimes.
Got
There's certain crimes, like it can be financial crime or something like that. In homicide, it follows common law altogether, so nothing changes there. But it has this small variation that I thought might
Interesting.
impact. But
No, this is just a plain mistake.
Plain mistake.
So why were the police so convinced so early on that Lloyd had killed his wife?
I wonder, Notebook. Remember, before you get evidence, you cannot say this about someone. Yeah, that is kind of, yeah. Apparently, except for minor crimes, apparently.
Behind the scenes, detectives had indeed been building a case, or at least a theory, from the moment Corryn's body was recovered. First, there was the marital troubles. Investigators learned from witnesses and family members that the Rayney's marriage had been deeply fractured. They heard stories of Lloyd's alleged affair with another woman, of Corryn's confiding to friends about her heartbreak, and of fights over money. Bank records...
Wait, he cheated? He cheated? Orbital cannon. Now.
When checked, showed that Lloyd had racked up significant gambling losses, nearly $50,000 lost through
A classic. Let's go gambling. A classic. Boys, gambling.
a betting agency in the year leading up to Corryn's death. Police theorized that money and control were the key issues. In fact, not long before her death, Corryn had reportedly told Lloyd that if he didn't fully disclose his finances during their separation, she would have his legal clients subpoenaed to expose any hidden income. This was indication she was gearing up for a tough legal battle in a divorce. It was a clear motive on paper, a husband who felt cornered by his wife's demands and the potential loss of reputation and finances. Then there was the matter of the secret phone recordings. Early in the investigation,
Oh, juicy secret phone recordings.
while searching the Rayney house, police discovered evidence that someone had tampered with the home's telephone line. Lloyd Rayney, ironically a prosecutor himself, was suspected of having illegally bugged the home phone to record Corryn's conversations. In fact, on the very day they named him a suspect, police also charged Lloyd with unlawfully intercepting communications, the phone tapping charge.
Is it illegal to tap your own house?
It is, yes. It 100% is.
So is it illegal to, what about like downloading phone recording apps?
I don't think that's illegal. I'm not entirely sure, but that's an interesting sort of convergence.
Because phones in 2007s, the landlines and all, they need to be bugged physically. There needs to be hardware installed.
Now you just got
Now you don't have to bug it, so to say. You can download an app, and I wonder if that is...
That's very interesting.
Because
I
the
don't
case
know.
in India is for sure, and we know so many cases. We know friends, female friends, whose phones have recording apps downloaded in them when they're children, for their parents to have supervision over it.
Correct. We had it in one of our cases, the Padma and Lali
The Padma
cases.
and Lali case. So would that be illegal?
I don't know. That's very interesting. All of this painted a disturbing picture. Was Lloyd spying on his wife's calls in the weeks before she died to monitor her plans, perhaps anticipating a divorce or an investigation into his finances? The notion that he planted listening devices in his own house suggested a level of premeditation and paranoia that was excessive. To detectives, it was another puzzle piece clicking into place. And then there was the physical evidence, but not much of it. That was trickier because this was fundamentally a circumstantial case. No one had witnessed the crime, and there was no smoking gun like a DNA match or a murder weapon with fingerprints. Yet, a few intriguing clues pointed towards Lloyd. Investigators had combed through the Rayney's home and cars. They noted what could be faint drag marks in the soil of the front yard, as if something heavy had been pulled across it. More telling were the botanical clues. In
Interesting. Very interesting. We'll see.
Corryn's hair were found seed pods from a liquid amber tree, a decorative tree that grew in the Rayney's front yard in Como, a tree that did not grow in Kings Park. The presence of those seed pods suggested that Corryn might have been attacked, or at least was on the ground at her home under that tree before her body went to the park. Furthermore, soil and small bits of brick or concrete dust on her clothes seemed consistent with the notion that her body had been dragged over the brick-paved driveway of the Rayney residence. And then, of course, there was the strange dinner place card with Lloyd's name found near the gravesite in Kings Park. It was as if if an accusing finger pointed from the grave back to Corryn's own husband. Taken together, the police formed a narrative. They hypothesized that on the night of August 7th, after Corryn returned home from her dance class, Lloyd Rayney confronted her, perhaps about the looming financial probe or their failing marriage, and something violent happened. They believed Lloyd killed Corryn at the house, possibly in a sudden fit of rage during an argument, and then faced the task of disposing of her body. The theory continued that he...
That could be the case. Sure, that could be the case. Absolutely. Yeah, we'll have to see. He does seem suspicious. And if he didn't do it, he does seem very controlling.
Temporarily hid her body, perhaps in the yard or somewhere discreet. Then later that night, after the children were asleep, he loaded her into her own car. To avoid using any shovels from his house, which could be traced to him, prosecutors later alleged he even borrowed a shovel or found one elsewhere while en route to the park. They imagined him driving into King's Park well after midnight, finding a dark, secluded spot, hurriedly digging a grave in the hard earth, and burying Corryn head first. In this scenario, while driving out of the park in Corryn's car, he accidentally struck the bottom of the car, causing the oil leak, but he kept driving until the engine seized up in Subiaco. From there, he would have faced a long 90-minute walk home in the pre-dawn hours. Remarkably, according to the investigators, Lloyd then took his daughters to school the next morning as if nothing had happened, and even appeared in court that day for a corruption and crime commission hearing, showing no outward sign of distress.
If this is the evidence the jury is presented, and I'm in the jury, I'll say the man is innocent. Because A, it is completely circumstantial to me. B, the media trial aspect of who goes in declaring a man as the only suspect with this evidence on their hand.
Sure.
In fact, this is all drawing board stuff. This is all whiteboard and you're joining threads. This is not you coming up with, we've got the guy.
But if you're not the jury, and you're not the one making a pronouncement, what do you make of the fibers in the hair, the concrete, the drag marks?
To me, it is all, again, it is, yes, he is one of the many suspects by this point. Like, if I'm guessing if you're in the police room, you would put him at tier 1 of the suspects, but there must be a tier 2 and there must be a tier 3. And also, sure, there are so many... You know, when you want to come up with a theory for why something has happened, you reverse engineer a theory.
Correct.
Right now, it's sounding so reverse engineered, where they have joined so many dots from him leaving, how he might have caused the accident, in the rash driving, how he might have found a shovel on the way. He's just found a shovel while driving.
Yeah.
That's just, again, that's such a... You know, when you're writing a screenplay, I've learned this technique of a happy coincidence in screenwriting, where one of the tips in screenwriting you're given is do not have too many happy coincidences because the audience is not dumb. When the audience suddenly sees that the investigator finds a clue out of nowhere, the audience is like, you didn't have any build up to lead to that.
That's
You're just putting that in there because you creatively couldn't come up with anything.
Right.
The shovel, the mysterious shovel that just happened to be on the highway while
The mysterious shovel. Well, a magical shovel. It just pulled up. It was just there. Yeah, I don't know.
He was rashly driving. To me, it's so made up. And again, this might have happened, but we're trying to prove somebody is guilty beyond reasonable doubt.
Correct.
I have a lot of reasonable doubt right now.
Fair enough. Despite what Aryan believes, which a lot of people believe too, to the police, if he truly managed all of that, it spoke to cold-blooded calculation. This hypothesis was compelling, but hardly ironclad. Still, by September 2007, Western Australia police seemed convinced that they had their man. Hence, Jack Lee's infamous pronouncement of Lloyd as the only suspect. For Lloyd Rayney, this was an unmitigated personal disaster. He was immediately ostracized by many. Some of Corryn's own family members openly voiced their belief in his guilt, feeding information and suspicions. His clients withdrew and colleagues kept their distance. Yet, interestingly, a strong circle of supporters remained by Lloyd's side, including many of the couple's mutual friends who simply could not believe he was capable of such a heinous act. Most importantly, Caitlin and Sarah, the Rayney daughters, stood by their father, who by now was their only surviving parent. They were just 13 and 10, grieving their mother deeply, but they did not waver in supporting Lloyd, insisting he could have never hurt their mom. Facing the full force of society,
Well, family members are always, they're too close to make a rational, they're too close to make a rational, assessment of the situation. However, I don't know. It seems like he was a control freak for now, just.
Lloyd Rayney did something few in his position do. He fought back publicly. In September 2008, even before any murder charge was laid, he filed a defamation lawsuit against the state of Western Australia for that press conference that labelled him the prime and only suspect.
That's the problem with fighting a lawyer, that the lawyer knows the law and what he can do against you.
It was a bold move, essentially the accused suing the accusers, and it set the stage for a legal grudge match that would play out over a decade. But while the defamation case churned slowly in the background, the murder investigation continued. Despite naming him publicly in 2007, it actually took 3 more years for police to feel that they had enough evidence to
So until 2010.
Formally charged Lloyd with murder. During that time, he lived in a strange limbo, technically a free man because he hadn't been arrested for murder yet, but under intense scrutiny and the cloud of suspicion. Detectives continued to interview witnesses and forensic experts, refining their case. And then finally, on December 8, 2010, as Lloyd Rayney was walking down a Perth city street, police moved in and arrested him for the willful murder of Corryn Rayney. The arrest was very public. Officers handcuffed him in front of bystanders on bustling Barrack Street. He was frog-marched, even pat-searched, and spread against the hood of a police car in a display that some later criticized as unnecessarily theatrical. For the police, after years of investigation, it was a moment of triumph. For Lloyd and his supporters, it felt like a preordained conclusion to what they saw as a biased investigation. Lloyd was charged and soon released on bail to await trial, spending Christmas 2010 with his daughters under the weight of an upcoming murder trial. The spotlight of the media intensified. Every court appearance was front-page news. Every detail of his and Corryn's private life now laid bare in court documents. Through it all, Lloyd maintained his absolute innocence, telling anyone who would listen that he had been framed or at least wrongly targeted. In a twist of fate, at the very same time he was preparing to defend himself against the murder charges, Lloyd's earlier defamation suit against the police was also inching forward. And then, the trial of the state of Western Australia versus Lloyd Patrick Rayney commenced on July 16, 2012, nearly 5 years after Corryn's death. But this was no ordinary murder trial. It unfolded under unprecedented conditions. At Lloyd Rayney's own request, the trial was heard by a judge alone, with no jury. Lloyd's defense had argued, successfully, that given the massive pre-trial publicity and the public labelling him as the only suspect, finding 12 unbiased jurors in Western Australia would be near impossible. And the court agreed. To ensure impartiality,
that is very true. Like, he's like painted now as this like super villain, like, right? Like public enemy number 1. You're not gonna find somebody. The chance of finding somebody who would be neutral in a way is gonna be incredibly difficult. That was a smart move.
Judge from outside Western Australia was brought in too. Former Northern Territory Chief Justice Brian Martin was appointed to preside over the case. Thus, one seasoned jurist would hear all evidence, weigh credibility, and ultimately decide Lloyd's fate. Over the next 3 months, in courtroom 7 of the Western Australia Supreme Court, a gripping narrative of circumstantial evidence was laid out by the prosecution. The state admitted there was no direct eyewitness or smoking gun. Quote, the state's case was circumstantial, but the evidence of motive was compelling, Prosecutor John Agwis said in his opening statement. Piece by piece, prosecutors constructed the story they believed.
So, this is very much based on media trial is dog shit, okay? This is all very much, just like construed, a theory, basically.
Lloyd Rayney was a man with a lot to lose. They depicted him as a husband whose marriage was crumbling due to his own misconduct, affairs and gambling, and Corryn's determination to hold him accountable financially. Witnesses recounted how Corryn had been resolute about a divorce and about uncovering any hidden money Lloyd had. It was suggested that on that...
I have to say, though, how is this man getting pussy? Anyways.
Fateful night, an argument about these issues had turned violent. The forensic and physical evidence was painstakingly reviewed. Prosecutors highlighted the liquid amber seed pods found tangled in Corryn's hair and the soil and the debris on her clothing that matched the home driveway. A neighbor even testified to hearing a dog barking frantically and what sounded like whooping noises that night, possibly a body being dragged or dropped, though this testimony was later deemed not conclusive. The dinner party place card with Lloyd's name found near the grave was introduced as a curious clue. Prosecutors posited it fell out of Lloyd's car or pocket while he was digging the grave, perhaps left over from a legal conference or event he had attended. Moreover, the state underscored Lloyd's peculiar behavior after the murder. They pointed out that he secretly disposed of the phone tap devices he had installed, right around the time police got a warrant to search for them. To the prosecution, this looked like consciousness of guilt, that Lloyd was scrambling to cover up illicit activities, even if not the murder, which painted him as deceitful. And then there was the timeline. According to phone records and the daughter's routines, if Lloyd was the killer, he had a narrow window, roughly from 9:45 p.m. to 11 p.m. to confront Corryn, cause her death before Caitlin returned home, and then after midnight, another window of a few hours to bury her and get back home before dawn. The prosecution acknowledged it was tight, but argued it was doable, especially if the crime was not premeditated, but rather a sudden act that he then efficiently covered up. One fascinating aspect of the trial was the lack of a clear cause of death. Forensic pathologists testified that Corryn's injuries were not definitively fatal on their own. There was no strangulation bruising on the throat, no knife wounds, no bullet. It was as if she had been knocked unconscious and perhaps asphyxiated, possibly by being face down in the dirt. Now the defense seized on this uncertainty, suggesting that if Lloyd had truly intended to kill his wife, it's unlikely he would have left the cause so ambiguous, implying perhaps an unknown attacker or an accident could be to blame. Lloyd's defense team, led by high-profile barrister David Edwardson, attacked the state's case on multiple fronts. They argued that the evidence was paper-thin and, quote, beset by improbabilities and uncertainties, end quote, echoing what they hoped the judge would conclude. They painted Lloyd not as a violent killer, but as a man wrongfully accused due to police tunnel vision. The defense contended that detectives zeroed in on Lloyd early and ignored other leads, a claim bolstered by some true.
Okay, we still got 16 minutes of this. Where is this going? Is he guilty or will he not be guilty? That is the question. You able my ass? Do you even know how hard it is to off someone within just 1 hour? He has to drive there. So he has to drive there. Right? With his own car. Here's the question, right? If, like, the Silver Fort is her car, right? He has to go there with his car. Drive her to, like, wherever he buried her. That's gonna be rough. That's gonna be really rough. Or is it the family's car? But I'm assuming it's her car. If I understood that correctly. How is he gonna do that in 1 hour and 15 minutes? What? This is gonna be incredibly tight. What? Wow.
Truly troubling conduct that came to light. During cross-examination, it emerged that...
Because, like, if it's her car, he has to drive with his car to where she is. Has to get into... Has to, like, knock her out. Has to put her into her car. Has to drive with her car to the place where he buried her. Has then to use the car. How does he do that? Drive off, and by reports, she was at least 25 minutes in digging land. That shit at least takes an hour. Especially since he digged down. How is this doable? How the fuck is this doable? No way this is doable.
Certain police investigators had behaved inappropriately. One officer had allegedly tried to pressure a pathologist to change his report to better fit the theory of Lloyd's guilt. Another had threatened a female lawyer involved in the case. The Corruption and Crime Commission would later find these actions unreasonable. This bolstered the defense narrative that some in the police were overzealous to the point of misconduct, eager to nail Lloyd at any cost. Perhaps the strongest points for the defense were the practical challenges to the murder theory.
Or if the club where she did that dance stuff is close by enough, he could have walked there, grabbed her, drove in her car to where he buried her, drove the car away, and then walked home. That's still gonna be incredibly tight.
They highlighted Lloyd's relatively slight build. He was 5 feet 8 inches tall and weighed about 67 kgs at the time, and he had chronic back problems. Corryn, by contrast, weighed about 78 kgs and wasn't much shorter than him in height. Could he realistically subdue her alone without any weapon in that short time frame and then lift her and carry her into a car and later go out to bury her? It seemed physically daunting.
I mean, 5'8", 67 kgs, chronic back problems.
Chronic back problems also, by the way.
Not that.
This was doctored evidence, and to be honest, look at him and you think he can dig properly with back problems. The weight different isn't that significant. Height different isn't that significant. He is physically, she could probably physically also overpower him in a way. Within an hour, no way. No way.
That meek a guy.
I think enough.
Not projecting at all. But no, I would say that, yeah, I think that is a pretty good argument.
Right? I think also dead weight, like a body just not...
Carrying a 70 kg human being,
yeah, is no joke.
As an unseasoned assassin.
Correct.
That happens to be weak with chronic back problems,
yeah,
and whose 67 kgs don't come from lean muscle. Okay,
someone's trying really hard.
Trying hard. No, I mean, again, the defense has, the problem with the circumstantial argument is that the defense can have a circumstantial counter.
Response to that, right? And it's ripped to shreds.
Yeah.
The judge, Justice Brian Martin, took note of this, remarking that indeed it would have been a, quote, difficult task for Lloyd to move Corryn's body given his condition. Moreover, the defense pointed to the riskiness of Lloyd's alleged plan, driving Corryn's distinctive car through the city and ironically down Kershaw Street, where several of his legal colleagues lived, with it loudly leaking oil, then abandoning it in a suburb where it was sure to be found, and then walking 7 kilometers home in the dead of the night.
No way. No way. No way. No way. No way. He would have needed to jog at that point. At his age, with back pain, there's no way he'll walk. No way. Impossible. Absolutely impossible. Absolutely impossible. Completely impossible. That is impossible. It is. There's no way. There's no way. That is impossible. He would have needed to do all this, right? He would have needed to. Okay, let's rewind again.
To shreds.
And it's ripped to shreds.
Yeah. The judge, Justice Brian Martin, took note of this, remarking that indeed it would have been a, quote, difficult task for Lloyd to move Corryn's body given his condition. Moreover, the defense pointed to the riskiness of Lloyd's alleged plan, driving Corryn's distinctive car through the city and
he drove her car. That means he wasn't there. So first he has to get there, get her in the car, drive through all of this, dig the hole, throw her in, and then get into the car, drive somewhere else, walk 7 kilometers home. No way in hell he could have pulled that off. Iceway, how are you doing? Hope you're doing good. No way in hell. That is, if he's not the Flash, I don't know.
Ironically down Kershaw Street, where several of his legal colleagues lived, with it loudly leaking oil, then abandoning it in a suburb where it was sure to be found, and then walking 7 kilometers home in the dead of the night. It all struck the defense as an absurdly conspicuous way for a supposedly clever lawyer to cover up a crime. As the trial progressed, the defense put forward an alternate theory that started to resonate. What if someone else attacked Corryn? Under cross-examination, police witnesses conceded that Corryn's attire, a ripped shirt and unzipped pants, could indicate a sexually motivated assault. The judge himself questioned why investigators had been so quick to discount the possibility of a stranger attack. It turned out that 2 convicted sex offenders had surfaced as potential suspects. This detail is wild to me and insane that it was ignored, but one of these men's DNA had been found on a cigarette butt just outside the Rayney home around the time of the murder. And one of them was stopped by police for a random breath test near Como on the night Corryn vanished. Officers noted he had fresh scratches on his hands and sand in his car, but they let him go after a minor traffic violation issue. Maddening. Just absolutely absurd. Yeah, I know.
What are you saying?
Yeah.
Aishwarya,
the incompetence here is just...
And again, this is not me fighting for this guy. He might as well be the actual murderer. Yeah. This is not how you conduct a police investigation. You know what this is reminding me of is the Suhaib Ilyasi case to a little extent, where everybody dives on one theory and then you try to come up with every possible reason.
I think it's just time-wise impossible. He is likely an unfit man. He would need to do all this, right? Get her, bury her in 15 minutes. Because otherwise, if he walked home, he would have needed to walk home in like 7 kilometers per hour. And that is already for like some young people already incredibly strenuous to walk at that speed. No way in hell is he. If that wasn't his other car, if like he must, if it would have only been possible if he pre-planned this, that means the hole would have been there already.
And fracture in marriage, which all exist. And the thing is, fractures in marriage exist.
Yeah, they do.
Fractures in almost all marriages exist. And if a marriage is more than 10 years long, if there are 2 kids in a marriage, you can pinpoint to gambling, alcoholism, infidelity. Something has happened in 15 years of being with a person that, if reverse engineered, in hindsight, can be attributed to a certain tragedy.
Sure.
Which is not to say these things didn't contribute to the tragedy. I'm just saying that if that's all the reason you have, when there is a convicted sex offender,
2 convicted sex offenders,
whose DNA has been found on a cigarette butt. One is found with scratch marks near the scene of crime in a random breathalyzer test. These are things you prod further. This is so annoying. It doesn't sound like the investigation of a quote-unquote first world country.
It doesn't. And which is why I think trial by media is such a commonly thrown around term.
I think this is just like husband, wife dead, easy husband, problem solved. Next.
But what's unique that's happening in this case is the police have pushed forth the trial by media. They are such a trusted source of information like this. They are, in so many cases, they are the only ones who have any information that they keep guarded for decades on end. So when the police comes forth and says, you did it.
Then it's you, buddy boy.
Everyone's like, what does the police know that we don't? They most probably know. Yeah, that's
also
crazy.
This is Australia. This is not as polarized a country, especially in the 2007, and as other, this is not the O.J. Simpson trial where there are
racial
half and half
tensions
people come. It's not that. This is, you trust the police, and if the police say something, you believe it.
That's right.
And they believe this man did it.
The defense suggested that the presence of these two sex offenders so close to her was no coincidence. Perhaps Corryn encountered a predator after leaving her class or as she approached home. Such a man could have attacked her, they argued, and possibly left her unconscious, explaining
I mean, that is an option, certainly.
the unclear cause of death before panicking and burying her in the park. This was speculation, but it planted reasonable doubt. By October 2012, after weeks of testimony and evidence, both sides made their final submission. And then, on November 1st, 2012, Justice Martin delivered his verdict. The tension in the courtroom was palpable. Lloyd Rayney sat beside his defense lawyers, his daughters, and a small group of loyal friends behind him, while across the aisle, Corryn's siblings and parents held one another, bracing for whatever was to come. In a lengthy judgment that he read aloud in summary, Justice Martin acquitted Lloyd Rayney of the murder charge, finding him not guilty on all counts. For a moment, the courtroom was silent, as if everyone exhaled at once. Caitlin and Sarah Rayney hugged their father as they cried. Lloyd, the former prosecutor, had just been saved from what could have been a life sentence. Justice Martin's reasoning pulled no punches towards either side. He stated unequivocally that the case against Lloyd was, quote, beset by improbabilities and uncertainties, just as defense had argued, and lacking in crucial evidence. The prosecution's timeline, he found, was possible but highly improbable given the physical and logistical challenges. The judge noted that Lloyd showed no signs of fatigue or injury the next day in court, which he found implausible if Lloyd had spent the whole night committing such an arduous crime. But Justice Martin didn't exonerate Lloyd as an innocent man living an upstanding life. On the contrary, in his remarks, he described Lloyd's conduct in several matters as, quote, disreputable and discreditable. The judge specifically cited that Lloyd had illegally recorded his wife's phone calls, lied under oath about it, and destroyed evidence, the recording devices. These actions, Justice Martin said, cast significant suspicion on Lloyd. Quote, in some instances, quite strong suspicion, but discreditable conduct does not prove guilt, and suspicion, even strong suspicion, falls well short of proof beyond reasonable doubt, he concluded. It was a remarkable statement. In effect, the judge was saying Lloyd Rayney may very well be deceitful and a liar and a cheat to his wife, but that doesn't make him a murderer. Justice Martin also leveled criticism at the investigation. He found that while there was no definitive proof of a police conspiracy against Lloyd, there had been, quote, instances of unacceptable conduct by some investigators, ranging from inappropriate to reprehensible, although he stopped short of saying this misconduct undermined the core of the investigation.
So, how is this going to turn out? Do we actually get whoever is responsible for this in some way, shape, or form? Probability, you mean competence? No, that's not what he said. He meant improbable that he could have done it, looking at the logistic and also like time issues physically as well.
Notably, he remarked that the evidence, in fact, quote, was consistent with a sexual attack on Corryn, implicitly shunning the police for not pursuing that angle equally. Outside the courthouse that day, Lloyd Rayney stood on the steps, flanked by his daughters, and spoke to the media for the first time in years about the case. He was emotional, thanking Justice Martin for a fair trial and expressing his profound grief for his wife's death. He said he would, quote, never stop fighting to find the real killer of Corryn, and pleaded for anyone with information to come forward.
It's been 5 years since Sarah and Caitlin have been without their mum. They haven't been treated well by many people. But apart from that, they still don't know, and we still don't know, what happened to Corryn, and that is a terrible tragedy.
Meanwhile, the state prosecutors were left reeling. They had poured enormous resources into this case and now had a very public defeat. They appealed the acquittal, arguing the judge had made errors in weighing the evidence. But in 2013, 3 appellate judges unanimously upheld the not guilty verdict, closing the door on any retrial. Lloyd Rayney was a free man, acquitted in the eyes of the law. Yet the story was far from over. The fallout of this case would continue to unfold, and the question of who killed Corryn Rayney would remain. With the trial behind him, Lloyd Rayney stepped out of the dock and into an uncertain future. He had been found not guilty, but in many ways he was not truly free. The murder of Corryn remained officially unsolved, and in the court of public opinion, the stain of suspicion is not easily washed away. It was as if the law had drawn a blank, leaving Corryn's true killer free and unknown. In the aftermath, calls grew for a fresh, independent look at the case. Lloyd Rayney himself became one of the loudest voices arguing authorities to find the real murderer. In August 2014, he even cooperated with the television documentary, The Lloyd Rayney Story, where he broke his post-trial silence. In it, he and his defense team spotlighted those two alternate suspects, the convicted sex offenders, whom they felt, quote, should have been investigated with as much rigor as Mr. Rayney, end quote. The documentary revealed tantalizing details to the public.
So, we literally don't know who it is. And whoever did it is still roaming free. Wow.
Like the cigarette butt with a stranger's DNA and the man with sandy, scratched hands near the scene. Lloyd's interview was emotional. He asserted that the police had stuffed this up by zeroing in on him and missing the chance to catch a predator. Quote, they owed it to her to get it right. They owed it to my children, he said. The plea was clear. Someone else did this. Please find them. Facing public pressure and wary of eroding trust, the Western Australia police finally agreed to a cold case review. In May 2015, nearly 8 years after the crime, Police Commissioner Carl O'Callaghan announced the formation of Operation Delve, a fresh team with a, quote, new pair of eyes to re-examine evidence and leads. Crucially, none of the investigators from the original task force were allowed on this new team. An independent forensic expert was to assist, and even interstate detectives might be called in, all in hopes of bringing an objective perspective. Commissioner O'Callaghan was careful to avoid outright criticism of the first investigation. Publicly, he maintained that a review did not mean the initial probe was flawed. But reading between the lines, it was clear. The police recognized that many citizens were not confident that justice had been served, and the reputation of the police was on the line as much as the quest for the killer. Operation Delve quietly went to work, sifting through every piece of evidence again. In the interim, Lloyd Rayney pursued his own justice in civil court. In late 2017, a judge finally delivered a verdict in Lloyd's defamation suit against the state. The court found emphatically in Lloyd's favor, ruling that Detective
Damn, another win. The police was racist. I'm throwing the racist card. I don't think so. I think they just didn't bother and thought this was an easy case. I think they just didn't care all that much. They just saw wife dead, husband alive, husband did it, moved on, because there's no evidence to show that racism played a role.
Jack Lee's 2007 comments indeed defamed Rayney by implying that he was his wife's killer, and it rewarded Lloyd a record-breaking 2.62 million Australian dollars.
W. That's a W. He may be a weird control freak. I'll give them that, but it is unlikely that he... I mean, especially since he's like... Why would he desperately want to find who did it when he did it, and then they find who did it, and then they found out it was him? That'd be a bit weird.
In damages. In scathing language, the defamation judgment concluded that senior officers at court formed a prejudicial view of Lloyd and approached the case with an assumption of his guilt from the start. It was a vindication of sorts for Lloyd, a formal acknowledgement that the police had wronged him in how they handled the case. But the victory could not restore his reputation completely, nor could it bring back Corryn. Lloyd's professional life had been in limbo. In 2014, the Legal Practice Board of Western Australia had cancelled his law licence on the basis of the phone tapping and evidence destruction findings. Though he got it reinstated in 2016, after a tribunal cleared him of certain allegations, by 2020, the pendulum swung again. The Western Australia Court of Appeal ultimately struck him off the roll of solicitors for the misconduct of secretly recording his wife and lying about it under oath. It was a stark reminder that acquittal is not absolution. Lloyd walked free from the murder charge, but he would never again don the barrister's wig in a courtroom. All this time, Operation Delve continued, and by mid-2016, the cold case team completed their review. But in a frustrating outcome, they concluded that there was insufficient evidence to charge anyone new. Essentially, after rereading every statement, retesting forensic samples with an updated method, and reconsidering persons of interest, the review did not uncover the smoking gun that had been missing. The police did not publicly release the full report, and they even denied Lloyd access to it during his defamation trial. All that was known is that the case remained open but stagnant. No arrests, no new leads announced. The trail had gone cold. Years have now passed. Caitlin and Sarah Rayney grew up without their mother. Each milestone...
Yep. So we don't know who did it. We have no perpetrator. Nothing. We got nothing.
In their lives overshadowed with her absence. By all accounts, they remain close to their father, who despite everything was the parent who raised them through their teens. Corryn's family continues to mourn her quietly, her elderly parents still desperate for answers about who took their daughter from them. In the public memory, the Rayney case occupies a space of unresolved intrigue. It's a story of a bright, loving woman who escaped one form of violence in her childhood only to fall victim to another decades later in a land that was supposed to be safe. It's the story of a legal system forced to turn its critical eye inward on a botched investigation, and of a man who, whether innocent or not, suffered an extraordinary fall from grace.
That's crazy. Wow.
In the end, the question who killed Corryn Rayney remains unanswered. Corryn, Veronica and Rayney's memory lives on in the hearts of her daughters and all those who knew her kindness and strength. The book on the Rayney case is not truly closed, not while a killer walks free and a family still yearns for answers. For now, it rests as an unfinished chapter in the annals of Australian true crime. If you have any information that might shed light on the murder of Corryn Rayney, please contact Crime Stoppers. Her case remains open.
That's it. Wow. We got no conclusion to this. We got no conclusion to this whatsoever. No, you haven't watched it. I will watch it. Chill. We got no conclusion to this. That's crazy. Wow. So basically they essentially nuked the man's reputation. Right? They nuked the man's reputation permanently. Found nobody else out of either incompetence or malicious or maybe even maliciously targeting the man, as if like because it's easy, right? Easy target, the husband. Nobody else comes into question. It's a cold case. I think it'll remain a cold case. Because dude, this was in the last update was in 2012, 2013. Now imagine this. Whoever did it possibly might already be dead potentially. That is crazy. Stone cold. Yep, absolutely cold. Anyways, like, comment, and subscribe.